Hello, everybody. Welcome in. My name's Andrew, and this is the Rampart. So this is episode one. Oh wow, cool. So we got a new podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a couple years now, and I just haven't gotten around to figuring out the software, trying to figure out how to make all this work. So a good friend of mine turned me on to a podcast called The Confessional, and I had some time in the car recently to listen to an episode that had Lee Strobel on as a guest. And if you don't know who Lee Strobel is, he is the writer for the book called The Case for Christ. And long story short, he was married to his wife, and she became a Christian. He was a profound atheist. And anyways, he using his journalism background, he wanted to disprove Jesus and win back his wife. And over a period of, I believe it was 2 years of him investigating Jesus, not only did he find enough evidence to prove that everything was real, the resurrection, Jesus, he ended up becoming baptized and became a full believer. So anyways, the podcast covered a lot of good things, and some of those most recent stuff is a book about investigating angels, demons, dreams, and near-death encounters and all that stuff. So, why am I mentioning this? Because I kind of can relate to Lee Strobel. I grew up believing in God, and then, as I got older in my teenage years, I just started like, well, he hasn't talked to me. I haven't felt anything. Like, is this really real? I don't know if it's natural for us to do that, but, joining the military, traveling the world, I remember I used to think, if there's a God, and why is there so much suffering in the world? Like, I used the things I saw to validate my negative feelings towards God. I always would think, like, when I looked at, the people in Iraq and Kuwait and stuff, like, well, somebody's wrong. Is it the Muslims? Is it the Christians? Well, I don't know. Somebody's wrong, so I'm not going to pick a side. Anyways, moving forward to my mid-30s, besides feeling empty and besides feeling that something's missing out of my life, some of the darkest times I had, going down depression, going down heavy drinking, there was a night where I thought about taking my own life, and when that happened, I remember crying out to God saying, I can't do this, I'm about to do this, please stop me. And I remember having a feeling of basically like somebody came and scooped me up, and I felt like no weight. I felt nothing. I felt like at complete peace. And I remember starting to cry because I never felt that before. And to me, I was like, okay, this is real. So, long story short, ended up getting baptized and, connecting with a lot more Christians and having these long discussions. And, to me, those discussions have brought out so many good conversations and so many deep thoughts. And that's what I want to establish with this podcast. I want to have discussions about things that you don't normally hear. Attending church, I would sit in and listen to the sermons from the pastors, and, a lot of them are really good. A lot of them, you go in and you feel like that message, that the pastor was delivering right then and there was exactly what I needed for the week. And then I would go back to work on Monday and then, start to feel lost. So, I realized that, going to church is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't go. I'm not saying anything bad about them, but for me, there's a lot more to it than just that. So, in this podcast, I want to talk about a whole bunch of things, like the experiences that I've had as a child of shadow figures and being choked. And then it wasn't until I became saved and I talked to a chaplain about it that he shared some of the same experiences. And, I'm starting to realize that a lot of this stuff's connected. People out there are having these experiences and nobody's really talking about them. So also in the episode, I also want to cover a little bit of, important things that I want to cover for the week in the Bible. So for this week, I chose Exodus chapter 3 and 4, because I feel like whenever God calls us to do something, it's in our nature to doubt ourselves and to doubt our abilities. And God knows what we're capable of and knows how to nudge us in the right direction. So I want to talk about Exodus chapter 3 and 4. I think it's an extremely important chapter because To me, it shows how God has a divine purpose for us. And on the other hand, it shows how we as humans push back on God's will. The story goes, Moses is walking around. He's got a flock of sheep. And as he's walking, he sees a bush on fire. So he's like, oh, that's weird. Let me go take a look at it. So he walks over and looks at it, and God appears to him. Moses gets scared. He looks down at the ground, and God basically lays out his plan for Moses. And in Exodus chapter 3, verse 10, God tells Moses, now go, for I am sending you to the Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before the Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you've brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. But Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. So Moses initially pushed back on God. So God's answering Moses saying, hey, we'll say this. So to me, the most important part of Exodus 3 and 4 is even when Moses is pushing back on God, saying, I can't do it, God finds a way. If it's his will, he'll make it happen. When Moses is like, well, I can't speak good, God's like, well, how about Aaron? So it's in our nature to doubt God's will. It's in our nature to think that we are not capable of doing things. So I feel just like this podcast, I don't know. I'm not a good at speaker. I'm not good at editing software. I'm not good at organizing scripts. Pretty much not any of that stuff. I'm not good in front of people, but I have this feeling in my gut to share the word, to share the gospel, to share the things I feel with everyone. And I hope this is what God wants me to do. And if it is, then he'll help me break down the boundaries and the barriers that prevent me from succeeding. So I'm going to wrap up this episode. I'm going to keep the first episode pretty short. I kind of also want to see if this actually works on Spotify and how it works on trying to get it over to Apple Podcasts and all that. But next week, I want to cover Moses' journey out of Egypt, some of the struggles he had as a leader with the Israelites, and maybe even look into some of the recent archaeological finds that support that there was an army that crossed the Red Sea at some point on the bottom of the sea. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys all stay safe. If you want to follow me, I have a Facebook page. Just go look for the Rampart Podcast. You can also shoot me an email if you got anything you want to share. You can send it to the Rampart Podcast at outlook.com. And thanks for listening. You stay safe.